Chapter 4. Simplicity. Ultimately, I managed to escape. Once I got out of the museum, I discovered a timer that froze on the 5 minutes and 12 seconds I had left, and I sighed in relief. I had made it after all. My dad, seeing me exit from the museum door, stood up and clapped me on the back, while the front desk worker congratulated me. "With your escape here today, you've qualified for the first festival," she said with a grin. "But if you wouldn't mind too much, could we ask you some questions? The prince wants to introduce you to DV." I nodded, then headed with her to a room where she gave an interview, my mind still reeling from the escape room I just solved. By the time that I got out, I somehow was still not over making it past this round, and even in the car on the way home, I had some trouble keeping calm. As we got nearer to our house, though, I did manage to regain some sensibility. I wasn't perfect here today, and I knew I couldn't be complacent in my skills at the first festival. I'd only just cleared the first step. When we got home, my mom was waiting on the couch, her face scrunched up in nervousness. Hearing the door open, she turned to look at me, and figuring it was best to not be coy, I told her the truth. "I did it," I grinned, and she sobbed as she held me, saying words like, "I'm so proud of you, darling." We stayed that way for a moment before my mom let go, saying how she had to prepare something to honor my win. I smiled, and watching her skitter to the fridge, allowed myself to head upstairs. Crashing onto the bed frame, I lay still for a second and stared at the ceiling before grabbing my phone. Now that I'd passed the preliminary round, I figured I should find out more about the tournament. But 30 minutes later, I was rather disappointed. It was true that I'd received an email from the prince about my win today, and that there was a file attached. However, coming through it only gave me information that I knew, such as how there would be 5 main trailer videos that would offer a sneak peek at the other competitors. Not only had the desk lady said nearly as much, but the prince had given no time frame for when the trailers would release, nor really much of anything else. In fact, I was able to confirm how no real knowledge was abound by looking at the media. Early in the process, the reports had been crazy, with information left and right on how the tournament would work. Now though, the only thing the media seemed to care about were these misclaims of Barbara Jones, who they were desperately trying to pitch as a real contender, despite how inaccurate that was. Not only had the girl in question violated the NDA that we had signed, but half the video she made was not remotely true. Plus, even if she was somehow competing, I knew myself and the other logicians wouldn't see her as a threat for all she said. Still though, it wasn't like I knew nothing about what would happen. The prince's rules only barred us from posting stuff online and mentioning the puzzles we had faced, so I was able to glean some information. In fact, many in my class of 2025 had expressed some interest in the tournament before. I, of course, had actually made it in the game, but I'd heard a few rumors of some people registering, and I was curious to know if they succeed or not. While the Victorian Martin Vizano had not applied, some other people like Kylie Cedar and August Pinsey had. Plus, there were some hints online if one knew where to look. It was true that the competitors couldn't leak their success, but their relatives were another story. A few days back, I'd seen a post on Gregory Muller, and though it could have been false, the way the post vanished after 2 days seemed indicative to me. Still, I had no real essence in my competition besides some odd rumors, meaning I would have to wait for the trailers to release. Of course, that wouldn't be today, but I had no knowledge of what it was, so I started a long process of clicking reload and constantly hoping something would change. And finally, several days later, something finally did. It was Saturday, and my mom had barged into my room at 5 in the evening to tell me to get ready for a guest. Initially, I was confused. We had no appointment, but I put my phone down anyway to hear her out. However, she'd already left my room, so I paused on level 12 of my cryptogram game and got dressed for dinner. My mom hadn't told me who to expect, but arriving downstairs, I was relieved to see the dress code was fairly casual. I hadn't worn stuff too sharp, so it was good that I matched the standards. Together, we waited on the couch for some minutes until there was a knock on the door, and my mom told me to open it. As I swung it open, however, I was met with quite a shock when a stuffed sloth hit me in the face, and a woman screamed, "Finley!" Then, recognizing my family's friends, my shock fell to a grin as I looked at my 3 guests. Mrs. Ashburn, as well as her daughter Finley and nephew Mason, were at the front door. I hope you don't mind that Mason tagged along, Miss Ashburn said, grinning, to which I just smiled. But he was very interested in seeing you ASAP. See, we all wanted to congratulate you for getting in the tournament, but Mason found it of special intrigue, she said, and suddenly I was very curious at what exactly she meant. I stood back from the door and let the three come on. So, I told Mason as he followed me to the couch, it's good to see you again. But I've got to know, does this mean what I think? Are you playing in the tournament as well? Yes, he said, and I found myself feeling dizzy. I'd always known him to be a surfer and not a logician. And I know that might seem like a bit of a shock, but since we've last spoke, I've been up to some things, he said, and I had to agree. The last time we'd met had been 2 years ago, and though we texted frequently, I clearly didn't know him as well as I thought. Wow, I said as Finley came to join us on the couch. That's certainly surprising, yeah, but really cool as well. So, when exactly did you start doing puzzles? I asked him in intrigue. Well, you remember how I got in that accident last spring? He asked me, and I nodded, vaguely remembering his text from that time. Yes, well, I broke my clavicle back then, and I was put in the ICU for about a week, but the problem was that I got really bored. There was nothing to do besides watch the TV, or so I thought, until I found a book on Sudoku. From there, one thing kind of spiraled, and I found myself interested in puzzle books, then logic in general. I guess I didn't think it at the time, but it really changed my life, he said, but was cut off by Finley's scoff. Oh, it changed his life, all right, she said with a sneer, because his girlfriend at the time saw the need to visit every single day, and I had to witness this pair of eels kissing, she whined, and I remembered all at once how close the cousins were. Though they technically just shared 1/8 their DNA, and I saw Finley a lot more, they both looked and even acted more like actual siblings. Both had blonde hair and blue eyes, a weird zoology passion, and clearly whatever this was. Yeah, it was pretty bad, I'll give you that, Mason confessed, to which Finley made one more indignant noise. And looking back, it was such a turbulent time, because I really did worry if I'd ever surf again, and I had a weird time maintaining things with my now ex-girlfriend. Luckily, the doctors only put me off for a couple of weeks, and now I can go whenever I like, but I was able to find some new passions as well. I nodded, struck by his story, and curious to know what exactly this meant. So, what else do you know about the tournament then? I mean, have you also already faced your preliminary round? Or, where exactly are you at? I asked as he adjusted the pillow. Yeah, I did, and I was glad because I got the port for my preliminary test. I've heard that there are several locations where people could compete, but I was able to escape with a few minutes to spare, he said, and I figured that explained why the prince had 5 different video trailers coming, and not just one. Nice, I commented, and watched as Finley tossed Mason her sloth. I got the museum, so that's quite interesting. Though I suppose it does make sense, right? That the prince would want to finish the preliminaries fast. After all, they've already taken weeks as it is now. Yes, Finley grumbled. And I'm hearing it too. Mason spends all day trapped inside his room, studying these odd logic puzzles, and never talks to me, she huffed lightly. Well, that's because there's always room to grow, he said exasperately, and looked at me to explain. I finished with 3 minutes to spare, but I feel like I should have been faster, especially as it wasn't like any one thing was too difficult. I think I've got to work on my timing, he said, and I liked his answer. Mason was more skillful than he knew to find the puzzles easy, provided they were like the ones in the museum. I knew a lot of people who couldn't have solved the logic grid. I don't think you should beat yourself up too much, I said. 'Cause I only finished with 5 minutes left too, so we had around the same time. It really felt to me like the prince was testing a variety of skills. So for just starting last year, your pace is very impressive. Plus, 3 minutes is still a good portion of the time. Mason gave me a faint grin, then scratched the back of his neck. Thanks, that means a lot, he said. I mean, I've known that you have done this for a while, so I hope to give you a run for your money. But also, I'm just glad to be here. Besides you, I only know one other person who's competing. Mason had surprised me once again, and I suddenly wanted to know exactly who this other person was. Is it your ex? I cautiously asked him, but he just laughed and shook his head. 'Cause I don't know if that would work so well if we want to make an alliance. No, it's actually one of my classmates named Stuart, he mentioned. He likes to talk the talk and make sure people know him, but he's not all that bad if you ignore that part of him, he shrugged. and I got the feeling he didn't love Stewart. Well, if the opportunity permits, I hope that us two can at least work together, I said, and he agreed to my statement with a definitely before we shifted the topic. As Finley started talking about her new theater program, and we went to the dinner table, I hoped that Mason and I had laid the groundwork well enough for a great alliance in the game. Chapter 5. Preview. Less than a week after reuniting with Mason, I finally got the change I'd been expecting for so long. Clicking a notification in my inbox, I received a formal invite to the first festival of Logic Lockdown, in which all competitors, their families, and fans would be welcome to attend. Placed at the Plaza Square downtown, the prince planned to meet the individual contestants inside his castle, or at least one of them, on Sunday afternoon, after giving a speech on the tournament's rules to the crowd. It was a fascinating opportunity, not least because I'd meet the prince, and yet I was still more intrigued by the other information in my inbox. The links to the 5 trailer videos. Picking the first one, I was taken to a film labeled Greenhouse, where the chirping of birds and falling petals eased me into the video. Slowly, the flowery curtain dissolved on the screen, and the camera zoomed in from overhead as someone spoke, first breaking the silence. A blonde-haired, ponytail girl with blue eyes and dirty hands was messing with a box, asking aloud, "Why won't it open?" But just as I began to wonder who she was, the music suddenly rushed in, as the camera switched to Prince Aetherius Azure. "For 18 days, Logic Lockdown has caught on, enveloping the nation in a swirling storm," he said, as the film zoomed right past him, through the city and circled the greenhouse. "And in that time, some challengers blossomed," he continued, and suddenly I was shown a bunch of close-ups. "My father's a lumberjack," a freckled brunette said, as she brushed mud off her jeans, and I realized that this was why the prince needed the interviews. "And that means I was raised to be determined," she went on, and just as she finished, the camera cut to someone else. "We never had much money growing up," a straw hat-wearing boy smirked at the cameras in a lively fashion. "So this chance is like the world," he said, and then the camera cut again. "I rejected a modeling firm just to compete," a buff dude with broad shoulders built on, pulling down a lever as he spoke. "So yeah, I'm gonna go all out." "By the time that I'm through, everyone will know my name," a scrawny boy with glasses yelled, raising both his arms as the music crescendoed. "It's Stuart Leonardo," he boomed, and I realized this was who Mason had told me. He certainly seemed to fit the description. "Over the past few weeks, more than 1,000 teenagers had taken aim and shot for the stars," the prince went on, as thousands of photos began amassing on the screen, each one with a different face. "But only one will end up winning $5 million in worldwide fame," he said, and the photos shattered as a heavy box from earlier ran into them. "Untangling the puzzles, weeding the competition, and outfoxing the twists," the person's voices rang, as the blonde girl from earlier held up a code and a dark-skinned boy wrote in his notes, "The winner will bloom and grow to be the champion of Logic Lockdown." A triumphant roar emerged, and the video then panned to several more faces who showed their determination to compete. I noticed a goth-like girl and an afro-haired boy in particular, as they raced with the music. "Will it be one of these that emerge?" prompted the prince, as a national emblem appeared and the music sped up. "It's time to find out." The prince's speech ended as a hammer struck down, and both the music and film gradually faded. The screen went black, but stayed on the symbol from the application forms, a key facing a lock with gray writing. For a moment, I was tempted to look away, but the video still had 10 seconds, and I needed to see why. Continuing to stare, I was rewarded when a line of glitching red text appeared before the video ended, and I quickly rewound to see a sequence of numbers.
61518-20815-195-156-25152131513165209-147.
Initially, I was a bit confused. I knew the digits meant something, but I wasn't sure what. Cautiously, I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen next to my desk, and decided to write the numbers down in case there would be more. I figured there would be, this was just the first film, but I wanted to actually watch all the trailers and not skip to the end. As I went back to my inbox, I saw the rest of the links, but rather than clicking to the second video, which was to the museum, I chose to save my film for last. I kind of wanted to keep up the suspense, so I went to the third link, which took me to the port where Mason competed, and watched to see what it was like. Immediately, I noticed that it wasn't just a carbon copy of the first, as this video began out at sea, with the prince in a boat at sunset. The music playing was low, and the ambience was with a relative peace as the prince narrated.
The mages of Iswaldi once said that it is not the end that matters, but the journey that counts. Yet, for these contestants, the destination means a lot. A logic lockdown.
A foghorn cut in with a blare, and suddenly the camera raced off, zooming past the prince and into the harbor, where I was pleasantly surprised to see Mason. Running across some logs, Mason was doing parkour on the deck, presumably racing into another puzzle.
In my life, I try to be better than I was yesterday, which was better than the day before, his voice was heard off screen,
and the film slowed down as he took one more leap.
And really, you just have to go forward, he said,
and then stuck the landing, as the scene shifted with a ha! I'm here to be methodical, his small ravenette said, while the on-screen version of her focused on solving a puzzle. Too many others will play flashy games, but that's not what I'm here. I'm playing for a win. Another ha sounded, and the scene transitioned once again. A tan-skinned boy was next, as he ducked under a beam.
This tournament is the most real version of a video game there is. You have to think quickly and react the fastest to win. Ha!
A girl, stout but proud, rounded out the section as she scratched her chin and thought. If you don't want it, you ain't winning. There's nothing else to say, she spoke, and I agreed with every word, as the music rang triumphantly once more.
Over 1,000 competitors have set sail in this game, hoisting the mast upon their boats, the prince said,
and a contestant did just that, sweat covering his face as he snapped the cloth in place.
But in the end, only one can remain afloat, while the others topple overboard,
the prince announced dramatically, and a storm brewed as he spoke, making the waves choppy.
Steering through the twists and turns, crashing past the sea of rivals, and navigating the puzzles, the prince said,
as more competitors and puzzles darted on the screen.
The winner will champion the waves and claim not just notoriety, but $5 million too.
The video swapped to show more imagery of rocks and cliffs, and then cut to a girl who was aligning symbols on the ship wheel.
Will one of these Zeramarans rise to the top?
The prince prompted, and the music roared once more, flashing the Zeramaran emblem as the prince exclaimed to
find out right here on Logic Lockdown.
The video faded, and as it started to die out, I reflected on this trailer was leagues more intense than the greenhouse, making me wonder if it was just the imagery or if its competition was just that much tougher. In this video, everyone seemed to speak with gusto and power, while the green horse had more of an array. I wasn't sure if that meant anything, but I was interested in how the other films would be portrayed, so I figured that could give me insight. However, I first had to unscramble a code, so before doing anything, I kept pressing pause on the end screen and waited for more numbers to appear. Sure enough, after some effort they did, and I discovered
251521208525920156122122311
in red. Once again, I wrote all of the numbers down on the paper, but as I did, I took particular interest in the pattern that it used. These were different digits than the ones of the first video, leading me to speculate that they were parts of one big code. That said, I remembered I had skipped my video, and keeping that in mind, I chose to write the numbers farther on the page in case the order ended up mattering. Then, after I marked the numbers down, I skimmed through the remaining two trailers that didn't contain me. By now, I was aware of the general format of the prince's speech, in which he gave some thematic quote, highlighted the starting contestant amount, announced the prize, and prompted the audience to wonder who would win. So I wanted to focus my attention on the characters and codes that were given. With both the gallery and market trailers, I really took the time to analyze everyone, and there were definitely a few people who managed to stick out. In both videos, I chose to mark the 3 that I deemed most interesting, and in the end, I compiled quite a list. First, Shane Mulder was a self-described nutjob who occasionally talked in third person, and he was joined by a cunning redhead and a sandy boy with glasses in the gallery. Both the redhead and the glasses-wearing boy seemed to be very sharp, and Shane had got recurring content, so I figured that he wouldn't be weak. Also, I wrote down the end code, which is
113461518208519516211521981565251521
this time. For the market then, my notes were similar, with the caveat being that I marked down different numbers and people. First, I was pleasantly surprised to recognize someone, August Pinsey, who had gone to my school. But I did notice that this trailer was rather focused on characters and not game players. I took notice of a blonde-haired girl who looked quite like a duck, as well as a boy who simply told the cameras, "I'm Thomas," during his interviews, as they seemed at least somewhat compelling. However, as I wrote down the code
81225-62114-2312038147920161215152120,
I probably thought this was the weakest bunch. So, with all the other trailers now complete, I finally was ready to see my own and discover who else joined me in the museum. I was a bit nervous. I still didn't know whether I was ready, but I was too excited to wait. If I was in this video, it would be pretty cool. And if I wasn't, well, I would still be in the next round, so it wasn't the end of the world. With one final breath of anticipation, I clicked start on the video. Just like in most of the other trailers though, the prince chose to start in suspense, opening the video this time with the sound of clashing swords. Then, after a second of pure noise, the screen panned out to reveal a battlefield, with hundreds of soldiers fighting around the Great Zaramaran Emerald.
For centuries, Zaramaran history has told a story,
The prince claimed, as the music rolled in like thunder before fading back out.
A story of divide, unification, and conquering.
The drums lifted once more.
And now it's time for a new battle to rage. One of mind and wit, friend and foe. It is a battle of champions, and it bears the name of Logic Lockdown,
the prince exclaimed, and a triumphant yell brought the first contestant on screen. My name is Ezra Myers, he said, facing the camera in the red room with a daggerish stare. And I'll do whatever it takes to win, he grinned, and I was a bit shocked at his tone. He was dead serious, but what might have looked like cockiness on some read like confidence on him, though I couldn't explain why. The drums kicked in again, and I had no time to think as the video swapped in me. To succeed in anything, you have to work for it, I said, as the on-screen version of myself darted through the environment room. And this game is no different. We have a list of geniuses, puzzles, and escape rooms to face, so you better believe that I'm already playing. I expect everyone to be, I said, and the drums followed me to a tan girl who was bent over the Brickopian throne. I came into this tournament hoping to prove my strength, she said, standing up after finding the secret drawer in the chair. And by the time I leave, I hope everyone will see how powerful I am, she said, and the drums rolled in once more as the video cut to a short girl in the map room. I didn't come here to make friends, she said, rolling out the map on the floor. I came here to be enemies. With that, the music soared up in response, as the camera made a cool zoom in on the map and battlefield.
Over 18 days, more than 1,000 competitors have taken stance and gathered up their arms,
was his response this time. And I really got the sense that this was a fierce trailer, even more so than the port. While the prince spoke, the major symbols were shown, as 4 cloaked figures put an end to the fighting.
Battling the puzzles, facing the others, and fighting the odds,
the prince said, as some girl covered her head in the plant room, and some boy fidgeted with the TV.
Only one may take the crown and rise as the champion of Logic Lockdown,
the prince declared, and a boy with short and frizzled hair grabbed the key from the dino's mouth.
Will it be one of these Zeramoons?
The prince repeated his catchline, and the main emblem appeared, this time over a wide shot of the museum as a whole, which had yet to be seen before.
It's time to find out, right here on Logic Lockdown,
he said, and the drums boomed once more before simmering down. I took a moment to relax, thinking I was good in this trailer, and briefly turned away from the screen as I waited for the numbers to appear. There was definitely some stiff competition in this game, I reckoned, and it would be interesting to meet them in person. However, the music didn't stop as soon as I thought it would, and growing a bit confused, I turned back to the trailer. This was not what had happened in the other 4 videos. The screen stayed still for a moment, but soon I found out why the music hadn't stopped. Slowly, the video cut back to the red room, where this Ezra boy stood, as he seemed to be laughing. The numbers flashed on the screen.
914-208-5-201-5-211-355-14209-239-188.
Still, he just stood there, and then looked back at the cameras. I'm impressed, he said with a sharp grin. This game will be fun, he finished. And as the video ended, I had to wonder who exactly this Ezra guy was. But before I went online, I knew that there was one more thing I had to do, and I wanted to do it by myself. Later, I could look up the names and faces of all the contestants, but this puzzle was one of the only things I'd get directly from the prince, and I wanted to see more of his style. Writing down the last of his codes, I worked on finding
6151820851512151513151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512151512
wish you the best of luck. And for the rest of you, I hope you have fun watching it play out,
the prince's message read, numbers flashing from a banner overhead of the first festival. As I walked in the plaza downtown, I marveled at the sight of the town square, garnished with banners and streamers everywhere, then quickly forced myself to recall my mission here today. It was the first true day of Logic Lockdown, meaning this was my best chance to make connections and get to know the competition. Luckily, I'd have plenty of chances. For the first festival, the Prince had packed a full schedule in one day, and things were already hectic. A full crowd is here to watch the Prince's speech at 5 o'clock, where it announced the rules and regulations for Logic Lockdown, and paparazzi were everywhere, scrambling to get the best shots. Even when we'd follow the Prince Azure at 6 o'clock to his event castle, I knew things would stay lively, as he said he wanted interviews of each contestant, and hinted that there'd be prizes involved. Plus, I was sure he'd save some more things for a surprise, so I'd chosen to arrive an hour early, hoping to harness some calm before the storm. But as soon as I stepped into the square, I was instantly caught off guard as a swarm of cameramen encircled me. Ducking, I tried to get out of the frame, but things looked quite dire until a voice from behind me spoke up. "If you want to take some photos, boys, they should be ones of me," a duck-like girl said, and the camera whirled for just long enough to let me get away. After walking for just a few seconds, though, I found that the chaos wasn't over.
Over here!
A voice I knew called to me, and I spun dazedly to see Mason at an ornate fountain in the middle of the square. He wasn't alone, though, and I focused enough to make out 3 others near him. A small redhead girl, a short boy with glasses, and a tan-skinned ravenette, who were all chanting loudly. Going up to them, I figured it was best to introduce myself by name. "Hey, I'm Cassius Underwood. How are you guys doing?" I said, and the others turned to face me with curious looks. Up close, I was able to recognize the short boy was Stuart, but I only vaguely knew the girls from their trailers, though I did recognize them both.
"Hey, it's good to see you, man," Mason replied as he clapped my shoulder. "Did the cameramen get you? I should have warned if they were ambush."
"No, but it was a close call," I said, and chuckled in relief, as I tried to place the 2 girls' names from their trailers. "Some girl helped me get away by offering to take the photos instead," I said, and with that, the other 3's attention suddenly perked up. "So that's where Lucy went," the redhead smiled, as I wondered who she was. "I should have known, really. But it's nice to meet you. I'm Jade, and you said your name's Cassius, right?" She extended out her arm, and I took it with a shake. But before I could respond, the other girl cut in. "Yes, I recognize you. Your quote was right before mine in the trailers," she said, and I was finally able to remember her face. "My name's Sharia, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I hope we'll get along." I grinned and shook her hand with an, "Of course, it's nice to meet you too," before I turned to Stuart, who had been saving his greeting. "And how about you?" I asked him levelly, watching as he seemed to smirk at me. "What's your name?" "My name is Stuart," he said, jutting out his chin with a flourish. "Stuart Leonardo. But I must say, you color me intrigued. You seem to be acquainted with Mason, and yet I've never seen you at our school?" he asked, but his question seemed like more of a challenge. "Yes, well, Mason is a family friend of mine," I grinned lightly, not wanting to tride over the shorter boy. "But is that how you all met?" "He only told me how you, Stuart, went to his school," I asked, but despite talking to Stuart, I aimed the question at Mason. And thankfully, he got the hint. "No," the surfer clarified. "We actually just met the girls here today. They saw us at the fountain and chose to say hello," he said, then was struck by a flash of something as his face suddenly lit up. "Oh, but before I forget, there's one more thing you should see. Here, look at the base of the fountain. It has a list of the competitors," Mason told me, and I squatted down to follow his invite. Looking at the list, though, the others decided to help me out by making some comments.
"If you'll notice, Cassius, everybody from the trailers made it through, plus about 30 others. So there's around 80 of us here," Mason said after a minute, and I was able to confirm all the names that I looked up. "Yes, and some of those names might stick out more to you," Jade built on Mason's point. "I don't know if it's bad or good as of quite yet, or even if it matters at all, but 3 people got repeat content in the trailers," she said, and I knew she was talking about Sandra Wheelox, Shane Mulder, and Ezra Myers. "Right, yeah, that's really interesting," I said, then decided to share some of my thoughts. And I am concerned about Ezra. Like him, I did the museum escape room, and I don't understand his confidence. He seems so sure of things, and the prince clearly liked that, but I wanted to know exactly what he was so sure of, I said, and Sharia nodded along. "Yeah, I thought that room was kind of odd for his reaction too," she said.
We had to translate languages based on some hidden codes, but maybe he saw something that we missed? She wondered. But the conversation suddenly broke off when the girl I'd seen earlier approached. Ugh, she grumbled lonely, and the five of us turned to look at her. I am so angry right now. Like, you have a once-in-a-lifetime chance to take a photo with me, the next big celebrity, and what do you do but accept the chance given? Except no, I'm Mr. Cameraman. I don't want to take the photos of you. I want to take photos of these other nobodies. Like, who the heck are you? She said, and whipped to face me. For a second, I didn't even get that she was talking to me, but after remembering the close call earlier, I understood. My name is Cassius? I tried, but that wasn't the answer she wanted, as she continued to sink. No! You're nobody! That's who! She said, and flipped her hair angrily as she took out her lap glass. Like, why would they want photos of you and not me? She asked, and I could tell that she was genuinely upset at what happened, and not just joking around. That said, I didn't know why she cared so much, or why it was my fault, so I just chose to look confused until she stormed off, sobbing. Yeah, I'll take care of her for a moment, Shade said, and went after Lucy with a stern look. And, I'm sorry, Cassius. She doesn't mean it, she said, and I watched as she chased her friend. Sharia, the lone girl left, felt embarrassed as well. But when Mason just laughed at me with, dude, what the hell was that? And even Stuart was smirking, she called down a little lit, and apologized also. I told her it was fine, I wasn't that hurt. And besides, it wasn't her who yelled at me. So, Mason intervened, and tried to save the discussion. How are we feeling about the tournament? I mean, I know we briefly talked about Ezra, as well as some of the others, but whatever vibes are we getting, he asked, but Stuart met his question with a sneer. Well, I'm curious to know the game rules, he said, because you'd think that, for all his power here, the prince would be more willing to disclose information. I mean, I'd like to know if we can really work in teams, or if it's a free-for-all. Sharia nodded slightly, then shared her thoughts also. Well, I would wager that we'll be in groups somehow, she wiped the sweat off of her brow. Since, after all, it is a social strategic game show, and I'd imagine the audience will get bored if we don't interact. Now, how the groups will be chosen and what role they will serve is a different question, she trailed off. Yeah, that's a good point, I said, and a bit concerning too. I mean, what if we aren't in teams and have to face some super genius round one? Like, I don't know about you, but the thought of going up against Ezra scares me, even if he's not as smart as we think. Mason frowned and scratched the back of his neck. Yeah, that is quite the concern. But even worse, we may have to compete if that's the case. I mean, you gotta think the prince would say that for later, he said. And I sucked in my breath as I saw Jade come back with Lucy. This one has something that she'd like to say, Jade growled, and I wondered who really was upset. Don't you, Lucy? The girl in question gulped, her eyes shifting down as she murmured, I'm sorry, Jade's wavering look. Mages, I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have called you a nobody or yelled at you just because I was upset. I smiled, glad that the scene was over, and said, It's alright, I know it's a turbulent day, to change the atmosphere. Then, as Lucy faded back to applying her lip gloss, I told the girls what they missed. Huh, Jade said, that's certainly something. But I agree, it's likely too early to directly compete, and I'd imagine the prince wants us to make connections first. Perhaps we can choose our own teams or something, though? If so, we have 6 people right here. Mason smiled as he looked at Jade. Yeah, that would definitely be good, he said. I was surprised to see both of them wearing a faint blush. Sharia, however, wasn't as shocked as me, as she cleared her throat loudly. Yes, but I do worry the teams won't be that big, she said. Since after all, everything's so vague. I guess for now, my biggest priority is making sure we can work together no matter what. Stuart agreed. Yes, I suppose I do concur. It's best we don't engage in petty squabbles when our opportunity to unite is so bold, he grinned, and I took the pointed comment. I'm in as well, I said. I think this is a good plan, so I hope it will work out. Jade nodded, smiling. Then, if we're all in agreement, let's trade our phone numbers so we can keep in touch. I'd like to be able to talk again, she said, but just as we started doing that, a disruption suddenly emerged within the festival. From where I stood at the fountain, I turned to look as a chant started around a teenage boy. With piercing green eyes and ragged black hair, it seemed like the face of the trailers, Ezra Myers, had finally arrived.